Thank you. It's an honor to be here among so many women. I only work with men. Many of these men are labeled as monsters for what they've done. They've hurt people, they've killed people, taken lives. But surprisingly, I'm come to bring you some news because as part of what we do, the men work with undoing this male stereotypical conditioning that leads to the typical alpha superior male. They do it so well that you might want to consider sending your boyfriend, your husband, your boss over there for a makeover. But I want to talk to you today about the technology, and it's a technology of transformation. And it comes from, of all places, San Quentin State Prison. It's my hope that this technology can be applied in many more prisons and also finds application in other situations. I'd like you to imagine that I don't stand here alone, that there are thousands of men, their families, their victims, their families that stand behind me as I talk to you. And may I amplify their voices and story. So 14 years ago, when I started first in San Quentin, it was about as hard to get in as it is to get out. But I started very modestly and built an organization, a nonprofit called the Inside Prison Project. I very briefly want to sketch you a little bit about the data on the rate of incarceration in the United States. There's 1 in 100 Americans is in prison. Think about that. 1 in 31 is under correctional supervision. If you're African American, it's 1 in 11. The system sentences 12 to 14-year-olds as adults. There's about 2,500 of those kids in prison, some of them for life. There's over 700 men scheduled for execution, waiting to die in San Quentin. 70% of the men are back within 18 months. We spend more money in the budget in California on incarceration than we do in higher education. It's $10 billion. I could talk the whole conference just about that, but I want to move on. An aspect of our methodology is what we call normative culture. The prison pretty much says, okay, buddy, you messed up, so now we're going to tell you how it goes, and when it's time to leave, you won't know what to do. We'll give you $200 gate money, and we'll see you later. You'll be back. What we're saying, okay, work with us. Help us create the kind of programs that you need. Help us teach them. We'll certify you, and we have done so. We have certified the first group of men that are prisoners that are certified, state-certified rape trauma counselors. With a sister organization, there is now the possibility for the men to become certified drug and alcohol counselors, and we ourselves certify them as domestic violence facilitators. These are all job skills that they work with in the prison with and then also can take on to the outside. So basically what we said is like, look, why don't you help us set the norms for your own behavior, and we'll sit back and watch you enforce your own norms. This brings a very different sense of dignity into the prison. The title of this talk is called Leaving Prison Before You Get Out. Viktor Frankl spoke some very true words. He was incarcerated in a Nazi camp and became a psychologist later. He spoke about the last of the human freedoms. The last of the human freedoms is that they can take anything away from you except your last human freedom, which is your ability to choose your response, whatever the circumstance, no matter what. So your freedom is not just a geographical given. It's not just the other side of the gate. It's not so much where you are, it is who you are. So we're all doing time on these issues as well. You know, if you've been in a long-term relationship, you might wonder, how come I'm having the same fight over and over again, right? How come I'm paralyzed by fear? You know, I'm doing time on various issues. So we're not that different. The other thing I'd like to say is we're not only focusing, sort of doing a spiritual bypass on the whole socio-political need for prison reform. What we have decided is let this personal transformation, this personal redemption, lead the systems reform. So we have developed a technology that we call the inside job. And there's 4 elements. I want to first mention them and then say a little bit about each one of them. There's emotional intelligence. It's a group process piece. There's restorative justice. That refers to a victim-offender education where the victims and the offender have dialogue at the end of a process. There's a program called Transforming Violence, named GRIP, get a grip, Guiding Rage into Power. And there's also a mind-body awareness piece. So the emotional intelligence program basically says, okay, there's 3 strategies. You can run, you can hide, or you can face. And your power comes from dealing with what's in front of you. So one of the techniques the men learn is how to sit in the fire. How to sit in the fire, burn clean, and leave ashes. So that you don't add drama to a situation. You don't always control the drama that comes to you. But you can make a commitment not to add drama to it. So the statement within that is to say that the origin and the cause of this feeling, say it's fear, lies within me. And so therefore the response to it also lies within my abilities. And it's something we call radical accountability. The men learn, in other words, there's an expression in America that says, don't just sit there, do something. We've turned that around and say, don't just do something, sit there for a moment. Sit as in, learn how to feel, learn how to make contact, learn how to breathe, right? And learn how to settle down and develop this resourceful presence. The next program is, or the next element rather, these programs have all sort of combined to this integral approach, is guiding rage into power. Jesse Jackson had a wonderful statement. He said, nobody's born armed and dangerous. And so you ask, okay, in this case, what happened? So we look into that. I had a shot caller from a gang in my class, from the Crips gang, who's done 20 years, become a facilitator, and he said, you know what? He said, I get it. He said, hurt people hurt people. People lash out violently because they're in pain and they don't know what to do with it. And then his apprentice, a 265-pound African-American guy named G, put his hand up. I said, G. He said, yeah, hurt people, but you know what's true too is that healed people heal people. He said, now I'm an example. I think that described the program very well. In the violence prevention program, the guys learn how to deal with unfinished business. We do empty chair exercises, role plays, they write letters. Also, sometimes it happens that they lose a loved one, a family member, or a partner, and they can't go to the funeral. So we do the funeral right in the program. We put the chair out, and the man sits in the middle. We sit around it. He says his goodbyes, says whatever he needs to say, and there's an incredible amount of bonding and affection around that in a very unlikely place. Little bit about the gender analysis I hinted at. Part of the program is called the male role belief system. Short for that is Mr. BS. That's the abbreviation, Mr. Bullshit. There's a box that comes with that. And in the box it says facts, feelings, actions, communications, thoughts, and sexuality. The in-the-box image is the image of the successful superior alpha male. And the in-the-box feelings, for example, I can't go through the whole piece, there's no time for it, but the in-the-box feelings are, it's okay to be angry, it's okay to be stoic, it's It's okay to be cool, right? That's really okay right now. It's okay to be cool, man. It's also okay to not feel as a man in that box, to be numb. Out of the box, it's okay to be afraid, to feel hurt, to feel vulnerable. From inside of the box, that's considered weak. But by making this visible, they get to explore, like, wait a minute, you know, if I can't feel these feelings, that's a good part of my life I'm not in touch with. And so let me make a choice that it's okay to start living outside of the box. Example on communication, inside the box, it's to command, to demand, my way is the highway or the highway. Outside of the box, it's I inquire, I ask questions, I listen, right? I might even ask for directions if I'm lost in traffic. So under this box, this male role belief system box, there's another box. Guess what it is? It's the female role belief system. And it's her job to substantiate this guy in his box when he doesn't manage to play that role. This is all within the stereotypical model, of course. And so another way he can substantiate, of course, is through violence, is to just take the power. And unfortunately, there's not time to go into all of the facts of the female role belief system, but I'm sure you have a clue. So the third element is the mindfulness training. We think of this as the mother of all interventions. We think of it as, look, the difference between committing a crime or not has a lot to do whether you can shift from having a blind reaction, no impulse control, to cultivating a response, making a choice. And so the men learn how to get in touch. You're held in prison, right? That's the verb. So they learn how to get a hold of themselves, literally, as in holding their horses, not do the right thing at the wrong time, but also as in holding themselves dear enough to care enough. Not an easy thing to learn, huh? Another thing we might all do time on, not just these men. The program in the mindfulness training uses meditation, yoga, and somatic practices. And really what it does, it turns the insight into a behavior because it goes through your body. It makes it operational. The fourth element are the restorative justice dialogue. The men write a crime statement. They name their victim. They read it out loud to each other. That's unusual. You can do 20, 30 years and not know what your neighbor has done. They make a lifeline so they see the patterns. How did I come from not being born armed and dangerous to where I ended up? And then in the end, there's a dialogue session between the victims and the offenders. And I can't tell you how powerful these sessions are and how needed they are both for the victims and the offenders. It's kind of like, you have a life. When you bring in a life, it creates a bond, right? You have a child together. When you take out a life, it also creates a bond. So this program engages that bond. I want to tell you a brief story about a woman. Her name was Radha. I met her at a dinner party. She told me about having lost a son through murder. His roommate shot her son. And I learned the whole story from the other side, from the first knock on the door when the sheriff comes with the news, to losing all your bodily fluids from shock on hearing the news, to not knowing what to do, the ashes, etc. You want to go home and hug your children when you hear a story like that. She then said, I want to come in. I want to see what you're doing. So I brought her into a group of lifers, and she brought a quilt. And there she is. She had a quilt made for every year of her son's life. And now this quilt was passing through a circle of men, touching it with hands that had taken lives. A little bit later, one of the men said, I think it's the anniversary of her son's death. You know your program's working when somebody comes up with that. And we looked into it, and sure enough, it was exactly 10 years. So we decided we should do something. And we decided to make a quilt. And got the man a little nervous, you know, embroidery, crocheting. Was a bit of humming and hawing there. But we cheated some, we used glue. But we made this quilt. And she came in, and we unveiled it, and she just wept. And what she then did was she came together with some other victims, got permission to cook a homemade Thanksgiving meal for these men. These men in 20, 30 years haven't had anything decent to eat, let alone a home-cooked meal. By the time it came through security, it was cold. It took a long time to clear that meal, I tell you. What she had done is she put hot gravy in a thermos can. Now think about that. That's love. Hot gravy in a thermos can. So that's a story of a woman working with us. So these circles of men that work together, something amazing happens. You know, when the unspoken is whispered and demons are stared down, tenderness comes back in a very unlikely place. And these moments of tenderness are moments where deep bonding and real love is expressed between groups of men. I like this quote from Rilke, who says, perhaps everything terrible is in its deepest being something helpless that wants our help. So if it's true that we need help there, then let's perfect a technology that simply offers this help. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. Lastly, the last outflow of all this work that's going on is that from a group of people that you could easily label as the forsaken, forgotten, the unforgiven, some of the men that had a life sentence have been released. And they're now working as change agents in the community. And it is an incredible thing to see. They're not only incredible professionals because they've been trained so well, but they're amazing human beings. Just human beings that have become a light and now hold a lamp up and in some dark places, you know, hoods, youth centers, schools in Oakland and Richmond. Oakland had over 100 murders last year. And these interactions are incredible. So these OGs, which is slang for original gangsters, they're also called uncles, work within the prison and now also work outside of the prison. And it's a powerful, powerful intervention. I'd like to close by saying that if any of this moved you, I want you to make a decision right now if you're going to forget about it all. Because if you don't want to forget about it all, I want to urge you to get involved. We need to bring prisons in Holland as well into the 20th century. There's all this thought leadership in places like this. And they go to schools, institute, businesses, but they do not go into our prisons. So I've shared some answers with you. I want to leave you with a question. This was written by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. That, by the way, is one of the 14-year-olds. If only it were so simple, he says. If only there were evil people somewhere, insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from us, from the rest of us, and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. And who, I ask you, is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? I thank you.
What a story. Yeah, I could ask you 20 questions. I'm not going to do that. But can you give the story of one guy that you helped or one of your trainers, which you are really proud of in how he succeeded outside you?
Sure. Got to pick from many. I think one that I'm particularly proud of is one of the change agents that comes to mind, Pat Mims. He found, next to working with us, he found a job for the Bay Area Women Against Rape, and he works as a supervisor dealing with kids that are minors and are sexually active. And he finds them on the streets, he meets them in the courts, he gets them back out of prison and gets them into treatment. And he's done over 20 years, he's only been out for over a year, and this is what he's doing.
Great. And how are you funded?
We're funded through bake sales. We're funded by people that come in and are moved to see what we do. There's a few foundations, and it's kind of a mad scramble to stay funded. You know, prisons and male offenders are not on top of people's charity lists, but we're trying.
You're doing a good job. Thank you. Thank you for your speech.